Hey y'all, hey! Welcome to the Talksins. Like the video, drop down up in the comments, say hi. Cause my mama raised me. She from Mississippi. I don't know who raised y'all, but my mama raised me. You don't come in nobody's house and not say hi. So you say hi, okay? Be cordial, be polite, be a lord. Well, you mans out there, thank y'all for coming in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. To the new subscribers and my day ones. Wait, where's that? Where's that?
Thank you. You love me. You really love me.
Okay, so yo, I'm just trying to enjoy the day. Okay, how y'all day going? Drop down, let me know how y'all day going and where y'all watching from. Because I don't know, I ain't never get the I haven't got the subscribers to let me know where they watching from. Because I told y'all a while ago, I got the email that said they're gonna be automatically translating to another language my videos to another language and showing them in other countries. So let me know where y'all watching from. Okay. Now, as y'all can see from the title, come on, y'all, let's discuss. When I woke up this morning, I seen Mexico was on fire. I said, what is going on? Baby, they didn't arrested one of the top cartels leaders over in Mexico. So we're going to watch that video. We're going to discuss that because what he hit me was, let me make sure. I hope they ain't watching y'all. Because I don't know from personal experience. So y'all don't be trying to come over here. I said, the streets is finna be dry. You know? Y'all better stock up now. So what they said had happened was, right, they had, the sting and everything to arrest this. Y'all know I'm gonna give y'all a little breakdown. Then we're gonna watch the official news channel. This the ghetto breakdown. What had happened was they was going over there to arrest the one of the leaders of the cartel, right? So during the arrest, they end up having firearms getting discharged. He get hit, he passes. So now what's going on in Mexico is that they are like setting, buses on fire, cars on fire. Fires it is erupting over there. They grounded airplanes, so people ain't able to leave. So I seen, yes, y'all can tell from the chat. So I seen on the news this morning that it's people that's stuck over there. So they was they called in to get a story or whatever, and they said that it was one guy from, I forget where, but it's here in Illinois, and he was a firefighter, and he was like they're just not prepared to deal with fires. Their department not prepared to know how to put out all these fires that's going on. And he said he'd been over there helping put out fires. And there was another one who said that they told him that the next flight is not leaving until Thursday. So that was this morning. I don't know if they have updated it since then, but we're finna watch this news story, and this is a guy from Mexico who knows, more involved, I want to say, with the politics and stuff. You'll get his title. But he said that what's happening now is that, you take out one position, everybody finna fight for that position. So there's gonna be a lot of violence and things going on over there because people are trying to, they got to show who the toughest, who the baddest, and who's gonna end up probably winning the territory and things that person used to have. There was also something else that president was just like, well, we did this. We did this. I don't want the U.S. trying to come over here taking credit for the shit I didn't did. I know how you white people like to steal. That ain't what that lady said. I know y'all like to appropriate shit. You ain't finna appropriate all the rest. What she said was that the U.S. gave us some intelligence, but it was my forces and shit that went over there and did that. And that's a lady. The president of Mexico is a woman, and so I guess women can't lead. Let me stop. Let me stop. Let's go here and watch this news clip, and why they'll talk about it in more details. Oh, y'all, I'm sitting here looking at y'all and didn't
into
even put this up.
chaos. Cars burned out by cartel members, blocked roads at more than 250 points in 20 Mexican states, authorities said, and left smoke billowing into the air. Jalisco's capital, Guadalajara, was turned into a ghost town Sunday night as civilians hunkered down. School was canceled Monday in several states,
Oh, it's
and
okay.
authorities in a variety of states reported at least 14 dead, including 7 National Guard troops. Joining us to discuss these developments is the Latin America desk
I don't
head
know if
of
y'all heard
Drop
it
Site
because
News,
I was sitting
Jose
here
Luis.
just looking at the
All
stream.
right,
But
guys,
go
we've been
ahead.
following some
Here we go.
significant unrest in Mexico after the killing of a top cartel leader. We can put this article up on the screen from the Associated
And this is taken from Breaking Point YouTube page. It's 18 minutes. I'm not gonna go over the whole 18 minutes, but
Press. They say here that Mexican army kills leader of powerful Jalisco New Generation Cartel during operation to capture him. The Mexican army killed the leader of that cartel, El Mencho, he's known as, on Sunday, decapitating what had become Mexico's most powerful drug cartel and thrusting swaths of the nation into chaos. Cars burned out by cartel members, blocked roads at more than 250 points in 20 Mexican states, authorities said, and left smoke billowing into the air. Jalisco's capital, Guadalajara, was turned into a ghost town Sunday night as civilians hunkered down. School was canceled Monday in several states, and authorities in a variety of states reported at least 14 dead, including 7 National Guard troops. Joining us to discuss
wow.
these developments is the Latin America desk head of Drop Site News, Jose Luis Granados Ceja. Great to see you, Jose.
Good to see you, man.
Great to see you again. Hi.
So we can put some of these images up on the screen
Yeah,
of,
y'all can see the
cars
fire.
burning. You can see fires all over the place.
Yeah, you can see fire all over the place. Like it ain't just one site. You see the whole sky is almost filled with smoke up there.
And guys, you can just let this run as Jose brings us up to speed. Just give us a sense of what the mood is there in Mexico and how significant of a development this is.
In terms of how significant this is probably the biggest fish they could possibly catch. Nemesio Oseguera, or El Mencho, as he's more commonly known, was the major player when it came to organized crime here. It can't be overstated how significant, how big of an impact against organized crime groups this capture and then his subsequent death really is for Mexico. And that's why we saw sort of this response in the streets from his associates in these organized crime groups. Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, or las cuatro letras, the 4 letters, they have various names. They are the largest organized crime group here, the most powerful, the most well-connected. It's said that they were...
And that's why I'm letting him talk. And this ain't me talking about it. This him.
Were rivaling, transnational corporation in terms of their reach and their international business connections. What was interesting about them is that they sort of were, in a way, a kind of a new manifestation of organized crime groups. I think a lot of times people think of the cartels, Sinaloa, El Chapo, right, Felix Arellano, all of these different groups from, the series Netflix that covered, the Mexican organized crime situation. This one was a little bit different in that they were able to fill a vacuum incredibly quickly, grow incredibly quickly, and that's because they operated sort of learning the lessons of the previous cartel groups of not necessarily kind of wanting to vertically integrate everything. They were kind of almost like a franchise model where, people kind of pay tribute to the central organization without necessarily being tied to it. And that's generally true of organized crime groups. They're far less organized than I think people think. But this is, of course, huge. I mean, he was the top of this organized crime group. They had presence quite literally in every corner of this country, obviously mostly concentrated in the states where they were most active, like Jalisco. And that's where we saw the most violence. And I think to explain that, obviously we all saw these scenes of, billowing cars and roads being blocked. And of course, those are disturbing to see, but they shouldn't be overstated. The article that you read to introduce this piece talked about the chaos and things like that. But that's precisely what these groups wanted to do. So they had their leader captured. And so as an act of protest, you can think of, they go and unleash these kinds of acts of violence, these acts of intimidation, in a sense to send a message to say they're unhappy with what just happened, to deliver a message to the federal government, the Mexican government, which was responsible for this operation, but also to show who's the strong actor. Because now there's going to be, as always happens when you take out the top, when you decapitate these organizations, a bit of a competition in terms of
pretty much as a whole, and somebody's gonna fill that hole. So that's what he's saying.
Who's going to now try to compete to become the new head of the organization. And what we saw yesterday, in a sense, is people trying to flex their own muscle to show, look how many men I can mobilize, look how much, unrest I can cause. I'm the one who should really rise up to be the next leader of this organization.
That's very interesting. I didn't realize that. Jose, as I understand it as well, part of the reason that they do this is to inflict pain on the Mexican government. Not only is it bad publicity, but, there's a significant number of U.S. tourists who are in the region, who are, some of them were sheltering in place in their hotels. And obviously, these things go viral, it'll impact their tourism industry. How does the Mexican government come to the conclusion to carry out something like this? Because we've seen in the past, with the Chapitos, that famous raid, and there was a massive gunfight and people were, there were bullets spraying in the streets and all of that. So they know this is going to happen. How do they come to the conclusion ultimately to conduct a raid like this?
So here in Mexico, we have a national security cabinet, and that is essentially the body that's tasked with making these difficult decisions. And part of the kind of calculation is that, in fact, under the previous government, Claudia Sheinbaum's predecessor, López Obrador, there was that famous case where one of El Chapo's sons was ultimately let go because they made the evaluation that the kind of violence that this was going to unleash was based.
You remember El Chapo when he had got loose and everybody was looking for him. So what he's saying here is that his son had actually got arrested, but because of they knew what the blowback would be for arresting his son, that they just let him go. Some like what's happening with these news stations that's not covering politics and stuff because they don't want to get sued. They like, we don't want them problems.
Basically not worth it. There was a calculation like, should we proceed with his detention and allow them to unleash the kind of violence that we expect them to, or should we kind of walk away and find a better moment for this? I think what's important about this one is that there's a couple of things. One, there was important intelligence that was shared from the United States, apparently. Both the U.S. government and the Mexican government have now said as much, that there was key intelligence here. It sounds like they knew where he was, that this was a good chance to grab him, where he wasn't being heavily protected, where they were less able to kind of mobilize. And so it seems that that's the reason they took the decision. This was a good moment. They had good intelligence. They could act on it. But the other one was also kind of understanding that they needed to strike against these organized crime groups. They needed to, I think, in a lot of ways, send a message, not just to the organized crimes groups themselves to say that we're serious about going after you, that this is a different kind of administration in terms of a much stronger, heavier hand when it comes to these groups, but also a message to Donald Trump, to the White House, to say, that right now the debate that seems to be happening in the United States is whether there should be unilateral military action by the United States and Mexico. Mexico obviously has said no, that's a red line for this government. They would view it as a violation of sovereignty, but you have to continually make that case because Donald Trump has said on many occasions he wants to send troops into Mexico. He wants to use drone strikes. And Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has said you can share intelligence, but when it comes to military action, we conduct it because this is our territory. And I think this is in a lot of ways really good for the Mexican government in that sense to say, look, share us information, we can act on it, and we can take care of it. And obviously now the task is to deal with the fallout, to deal with these incidents, although they've largely been under control.
So what I take from that is that they like, you ain't finna come over here and do us like you did Venezuela. That you finna take over here and talking about we run that country. Who's gonna run this town tonight? Hey. They like, no, 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 not today, Trump. We finna go and we finna get this cartels. We finna do it and we finna put it on the news. So y'all ain't gonna have no excuses to say why y'all had to come over here before fentanyl, even though we all know it's coming from China, but we even closer than Venezuela. So what you're not finna do is try to say, let's do this together. Nope. My army got it. That lady is smart. My army got it. Nope. We can take your intelligence. We can act on it and everything. We need to show y'all we got the strength to handle what's over here, fam. What's ours is ours. Do you hear me? Because I'm like, Mexico must ain't got no oil. They said they ain't got oil, but they got the coca. And you ain't finna come over here and try to take one leader out of power just to install yourself and take over our production. Nope, the devil is a lie. That's what that lady said.
As of yesterday, 90% of all the roadblocks had been stopped, had been kind of, de-established. But, this morning, Gladys Sheinbaum's in her morning press conference now, and she's giving the message as we speak, essentially giving the same thing, that things are now fully under control.
Interesting.
Is there a fear that, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't? If you don't strike this cartel leader and take him out, then the U.S. government says, see, they're not dealing with the cartel, so we have to go in and take unilateral action. But then when you do take out the cartel leader, it leads not just to these flare-ups, but the expectation is there probably will be some sort of turf war and potential increased violence. And then the U.S. government can look at that, Trump can look at that and say, see, look at all this escalating violence. They need us. We have to go in.
Yeah, and it's quite likely that there'll be some actors who will make that kind of case and say, well, look at everything that's happening. You clearly don't have under control. And that's actually why I think we saw online yesterday just fake images, artificial intelligence. There was this image of a plane on fire that was not real whatsoever. Somebody apparently triggered an alarm inside of the airport in Guadalajara, and that made some people panic. And then somebody took that image and said, look, the commandos from the organized crime groups have taken over the airport, because they want to sow this chaos. They want to sow this kind of sense of a lack of control in order to, I think in one regard, try to support this argument that it's out of control and the Mexican government can't handle it, but also to try to, like I said at the beginning, to send this message that they are more powerful than perhaps people account for, right? And, I think one of the reasons they also acted yesterday is
they said big Mexico, not the little one. So we got to show y'all. Y'all think our army ain't about that life. We're about that life. That's what they're trying to get out there. So they like, you can come over here and install troops and stuff. We got it.
that there's very small windows of opportunity. These are wily actors. I mean, how many times did El Chapo escape from custody, right? It's only because he's been extradited and it's more difficult for him to be able to kind of engage in the bribery that it takes to be able to get free that he's still in custody today. And so
all I'm saying, I don't work nowhere in them systems. But how much was he paying? I just want to know. I'll ask him for a friend. How much you paying?
I think that window, they saw it as a good one to act, and yes, cognizant of the consequences in terms of what will happen next. The case of Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación is curious too, because, for example, with the I don't know what to call it, because he wasn't extradited, the kidnapping of El Mayo, that created a lot of
they're talking about the president of Venezuela right now.
Of unrest as well, but I think that's because there was already kind of a dispute internally between rival factions inside of that cartel, where you had the Chapitos and the Mayitos. So that's part of why we saw so much more violence. And this one
is the president
doesn't look like there's a natural successor.
Venezuela.
A lot of his closest associates and Mencho's closest associates are either dead or in jail. And so, his son is already detained. His daughters are not that active, so it's not clear who will take over. So there's likely going to be a lot of internal power disputes, and they're going to do it through violence. And so there, it's important to see in terms of what's the actual capacity of the Mexican National Guard, the Mexican Armed Forces, to ensure security, particularly in these kinds of hot spots where they are most active.
So, simple term, they hit him while he was weak. His people was dead or in jail, like the armies, the protection, not the armies, but the protection that he had around him was dead or in jail. his son's already in jail, and they said his daughter's not in the lifestyle like that. So he pretty much he wasn't installated like he previously was. So they got him while it was prime time for striking. So they struck.
That really is the major challenge today.
Jose, how does the Mexican government deal with it's kind of maybe too broad of a question, but with U.S. security? So, like, for example, you've had the U.S. intelligence sharing that happened that led to this threat. But we also saw earlier there was an incident, maybe you can tell us about, where a drug dealer, international fugitive, was seized by the United States, and Kash Patel took credit for it. But the Mexicans were like, hey, man, you weren't supposed to talk about that. Like, we don't like to acknowledge how much we share back and forth.
And he's like, look, y'all try to be all flashy and shit over in America. That ain't how we do this. Everybody know bosses don't speak. What's understood ain't got to be explained. We could act right.
How does the Mexican government handle that domestically? Like, why are they so reticent to admit U.S. cooperation to the Mexican public? Is there a political dynamic I'm missing? How does that work?
Yeah, so the case you're referring to is this Canadian, apparently an Olympic athlete who was accused of being, well positioned, an important player in organized crime. And yeah, it's still actually not clear exactly whether or not he turned himself in, whether it was an operation, was it done by Mexican forces, did the FBI participate directly? That would be extraordinary and unusual. I have trouble believing Kash Patel sometimes because we know he has a penchant for wanting to tell his own story in his own way that kind of inflates his role in.
He said that nigga be lying. that's the political nice way of saying that motherfucker lying. he has the propensity, what they say, stretch a story, tell fibs, little white lie. No, say what he wants. He's trying to be nice. He want to say that nigga be lying.
Oh, see, there you go. There you go. The lies. There you go. This bitch, I'm telling you, trifling.
And all of this, so I would, be hesitant to take his, totally as believable. But you're right, there is a certain kind of reluctance on the Mexican government to admit this, and a lot of that is because of the nationalist sentiment. Morena, her political party, is a very Mexican nationalist movement. It's kind of one of the pillars of their political ideology, and it is seen as, almost as offensive that we would need the support of the United States for all of this, right? That's why it's such a hard line to not permit unilateral military action by the United States or even the presence of U.S. troops in actual operations. They are U.S. troops here for trainings. One was recently approved by the Mexican Senate, for example. So there's a dislike for it amongst the population. And I think because people are worried that it would be a slippery slope, right? How do U.S. entanglements abroad always begin? It always starts with that, with training, with advice. Oh, well, should give you some information. But you're right to point out that there's extraordinary amount of information sharing. In fact, more than we probably know. Claudia Sheinbaum and Donald Trump apparently had more than a dozen phone calls, but we only really know the details of a handful of them. So they're obviously high-level negotiations, and that's how the Mexican government likes to do things. I think particularly with the administration we have in the United States now, where they are boastful and they like to stretch the truth to be polite about it, right? And so
yeah, he said they boast when their ass always lying. That's what he said. They big show offs. Don't you don't got to talk about it. Be about it. That's what he said.
She's like, she says, I often don't like to respond to whatever his public statements he makes. We have our conversations. They happen at the table. They happen behind closed doors. That's what's actually important in the bilateral relationship.
Got it.
What he said is that his president said, I don't gossip like a little bitch. I keep my shit behind closed doors and shit because I'm grown. That's what he said.
And how do most Mexicans feel about how Sheinbaum is navigating the relationship with the U.S.?
Well, I think they would feel encouraged. I think they feel very positive about it. She has extraordinarily high approval ratings. They oscillate between 70 and 80%. I mean, the kinds of approval ratings people are unheard of in most parts of the world. And
what he said, when he's saying in most parts of the world, he trying not to take a dig at the United States because Trump got the worst approval ratings in history, only second to the first time he was the president. So he was like, well, she ain't worried about it. They like her over here, unlike other parts of the world. I said, oh, the shade.
part of it, one of the places where she does receive criticism, where people feel like more needs to be done, is precisely around security. Under the previous administration of Lopez Obrador, there was a pretty major shift in the security strategy where they went from an all-out war. They stopped talking about war. They stopped talking about, the war against the cartels, and instead started focusing more on investigation, prevention, above all, this philosophy of investing in communities and in young people to try to dissuade them from organized crime groups. And I think in a lot of ways it was effective. But we're also dealing with really violent, heavily armed, and extremely well-funded organizations where social investment is not going to be enough, right?
Exactly.
And I do think that with Claudia Sheinbaum, and she probably wouldn't say as much so as to not seem as if she's disagreeing with her predecessor because of the important place he occupies in the kind of political imaginary in this country, but I do think has taken a far more aggressive approach of wanting to go after these major figures. Of I think part of it is is naturally due to the pressure of the United States to kind of have more things to show off in terms of successes.
Okay, let me translate it before he get too far. What he said was, like he said before, they had arrested El Chapo's son. The previous administration was like, nah, we don't want that problem, so they let him go. So what he just said is the previous administration did more focusing on like community activity and trying to get the kids from not being involved with the cartel. He said this administration said, look, there's only so much talking you can do to ignorant because we ain't finna bring a knife to a fight. You hear me? So they are more aggressive in their approach. Instead of just saying community and let's try to save the youth, they are more aggressive in going out to arrest the cartels. That's what he said. Not me. Again, not me. And by listening to Mexico, I ain't saying none of this. This is all what he said.
But I do think that a lot of people are feeling reassured, feeling like actions are being done and that steps are being taken to attend to the kind of quality of life things. Organized crime groups have been active here in this country for decades, right? But it's sort of their interventions, the way that they actually affect the day-to-day of people that really kind of undermines their confidence in the ability of the state to handle this, right? So the kidnappings, the extortion, all of that actually under her security chief, Omar Garcia Harfuch, who incidentally was once a target of the very man who was killed yesterday, has been far more on investigation and actually, going after the money that provides them the ability to engage in all of this. And, we're seeing a very...
That's good information. The guy who she was on his list, the president now was on his list. Well, I don't know if he said the president or the top of the security, but she was on the list, on his list, the one who got unalive, that they were trying to arrest, who got shot and got unalive, that she was on the list, on his list before. Now she was like, it's payback, bitch. That ain't what she said.
Very slight increase, I think, in the approval ratings when it comes to security here in Mexico because of that small shift, but important shift in her security strategy.
So interesting.
One more question I have for you on a somewhat separate note, and I asked the same question of Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who we had on a bit earlier. This is with regard to Cuba. I'm sure you saw Supreme Court struck down Trump's ability to levy tariffs unilaterally using the IEPA authority. He had used this to threaten Mexico and to threaten Sheinbaum to try to enforce this illegal oil embargo with Cuba. Do you think that that decision changes the calculus at all for the Sheinbaum government?
Well, it looks like Trump is going to go forward with it no matter what.
Yeah.
And, Mexico has been threatened with tariffs on half a dozen occasions and has been able to talk their way out of it almost every single time. Even this
He's saying you don't give a damn, we don't give. Hey,
recent one where he announced these kind of across-the-board tariffs on every country. Once again, countries, Canada, Mexico, and that's part of the USMCA, are exempt from it. And so
he said he talk about it, but he don't be about it. He always saying that, but it never happens. That's what he
the
said.
thing about this one in particular, the one about Cuba, is that my reading of it, it was primarily addressed to Mexico. Mexico, stop sending your oil to Cuba or we're going to impose this tariff on you. And I think the fact that we saw the government respond and suspend its shipments tells us that in those closed doors negotiations, there was definitely a very clear threat to say that this one's serious. You're not going to be able to talk your way out of this one, that we want to choke off the supply of oil to Cuba. And so you better play ball.
And he said is that Trump said you ain't finna keep talking me out my penny draws. I am for real this time. I am putting my foot down. Stop sending that oil over to Cuba, or we're gonna have to come take your ships like we did Venezuela. He ain't say that shit.
And that's why we've seen them
That's how I
suspended. Because I think, there's a lot of voices out there who are saying, well, why don't they just break the blockade, right? Why don't they just kind of challenge, call us bluff? The United States is having some tricky economic numbers coming published out now, not less job creation, all of that. Can they really afford to put a tariff on its number one trading partner? And I think they would. And I think they've transmitted that message to the Mexican government that this is serious. And so the only way out of this for the Mexican government is through negotiation, some kind of diplomatic breakthrough to convince them that if they don't allow Mexico or any other country to provide oil, then they're going to produce a massive humanitarian crisis, which itself is going to produce a huge refugee crisis, which is going to land on your doorstep, United States. So I think that's the kind of angle that they've been pushing for, and it seems to be working. There seems to be rumors of at least letting some oil come in so that, that the situation doesn't become such a big problem that we see, millions of Cubans trying to leave the island, because if they get no oil, we're talking about basically the collapse of society, right? Nothing works without energy. There's no food, there's no hospitals, there's no schools. I mean, it'll be a nightmare scenario for the Cuban people, which would absolutely produce a refugee crisis in the region and for the United States. And I don't think Marco Rubio, Stephen Miller want to be tagged with that, to say you're the reason there's a new migrant crisis here.
All right, you already try to get rid of the immigrants that you got here, and then you're gonna cause a new crisis that will cause another flood of immigrants. That's what he's saying. He's saying they don't want them problems
in the United States.
Good point.
We will say, Jose.
Okay, yeah, I had to get up out of here because I had to go get my baby. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on all social media. Drop down in the comments. Let me know what y'all think about this Mexico situation and what you think gonna happen with Cuba. Okay, don't forget, hit all so you can see every time that I go live. Okay, get in this comment, send these engagements up, and if it's possible to hype the video, I don't know if I have it yet, but if it's possible, over on YouTube where you can hit hype up under the video, hype the video, share this video. That also helps the channel. If you share this video out to social media, email it to yourself, I don't care, to your grandma, email it to people and get my engagements and stuff up, y'all. I got to get out of here. Enjoy the rest of y'all night. Try to be safe out here in these streets.